hearing their stories, going to therapy and to counseling alongside them, driving them there, sometimes even sitting in on their sessions with them, it was very clear to me that what had happened was assault. And so starting to ask more questions and learn more about their stories and why they were asking those questions, I started realizing it's porn.
So today I am incredibly pleased to be able to introduce our next guest on here because it is my sister Devorah Gilman. If you attended our conference, you would have seen her speak in Ottawa last spring. And she has done a lot of work working with girls who've been through all sorts of difficult situations and helping them navigate the road towards healing and health. And so, yeah, I just want to talk to you, Devorah. Thank you so much for doing this and taking the time.
My pleasure.
And so, yeah, I just want to talk about what is actually going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
In today's world, the pornified world that girls are having to navigate, especially when it comes to relationships. And so maybe you can just quickly try to kind of explain how you even realize, what was going on with the people that you were walking with in their life, just starting off being a good friend, right? And just help people, and how in the world you're either kind of suddenly just opened to, maybe not suddenly, to what was going on. So kind of what was that journey for you? How did you end up to the point where you're willing to get up on a stage and speak to hundreds and hundreds of people about pornography?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of things that slowly started to make me aware of how pornography was affecting girls. However, the thing was that helped me really understand, kind of put all those different puzzle pieces together and understand that the underlying issue was pornography, was an odd question I had multiple friends of mine ask me. And these were girls who'd been sexually assaulted, were taking steps towards healing from their sexual assault experience. And they were asking me the oddest question I thought at first, which was I raped? Was that rape? And talking to someone and walking alongside survivors of sexual assault, there's a lot that goes on. There's a lot of trauma, obviously, and there's a lot of support needed. And I just remember that question really stood out to me because hearing their stories, going to therapy and to counseling alongside them, driving them there, sometimes even sitting in on their sessions with them, it was very clear to me that what had happened was assault. And so starting to ask more questions and learn more about their stories and why they were asking those questions, I started realizing it's porn. These girls were asking the question of, was that assault? Because they had watched assault happen on a screen, because often their partners, their abusers, the guys in their life, they were watching pornography. They were introducing them to pornography, and they were telling them it was entertainment. That's what was normal, asking them to do the things they saw in porn. So when they were actually violated, when they said no, when they were coerced, when they were all that kind of stuff, when that happened, in their mind, they were thinking of what they saw in porn, and they were thinking that, you know what, maybe this is just like that. Maybe it's just entertainment. Maybe this is something I'm supposed to just experience in my life as a girl. Maybe I truly am an object. And so learning their stories and walking alongside just my friends, just the girls around me, I started realizing how pornography had impacted them, and how much it had affected their minds to the point where they couldn't tell the difference between someone loving them and someone hating them. They didn't know what was making love. They didn't know what was sexual assault. They actually couldn't discern the two because pornography had changed the way they thought.
And so, backing up just for a second, what was it like for you as someone who had not been exposed to all this type of violent, degrading content, to realize that this is what your friends were being impacted by? What was that like? As just someone who cares about them and who cares about helping people in the world. And I mean, you obviously had heard my testimony of dealing with pornography. You've heard a lot of testimonies, but to realize this is actually what is affecting your friend, what was that like for you?
It was pretty devastating to hold your friend as she weeps and shakes as she's going through PTSD, reliving those moments, the fear that people are going through, and knowing that that experience is because of pornography. That the guys in my friend's life had treated them that way because they had learned how to treat girls from pornography. And I think there's a big difference between being naive and innocent. And I think some people who hear these stories, they're naive about what's going on in the porn industry. They're naive about what's going on around them. So I think that'd be a different kind of shock for myself. Like you said, like I hadn't been personally exposed to this kind of pornography myself, but I had read more academic papers about it. I knew what was out there. And so that's where I was able to kind of put two and two in my mind together, hearing people's stories, because I knew what was being watched. And then I knew what these girls were going through. And it was hard to take at first because it's just so heartbreaking. Like I said, holding crying friends and walking alongside them and realizing that the horror they had experienced was rooted in pornography.
And I think a lot of what we dealt with, particularly in terms of pornography and how it's affecting young women, has been that awareness that we're not just talking about Amish romance novels. In walking with these girls, right? You've walked with multiple friends on their journey to healing, and has there been kind of that, or how have they navigated that stigma of the fact that people still think that guys watch porn and girls just read these romance novels?
Well, when I'm walking with my friends, one thing is I talk about porn a lot. So they know that I understand that it's not a guy's issue, that when they're telling me that they're watching a porn, I know that they're watching women be violently assaulted and degraded in a video. They're not watching, like you said, they're not reading romance novels. They're actually watching hardcore pornography. So people talk to me because I talk about it. It has been hard though, because I know for some of them, they don't want to tell their mom or they don't want to tell, or maybe they did tell their pastor or their pastor's wife, and they just kind of assumed that that's what was going on, kind of like, oh, I'll pray for you, why don't you pick better entertainment type kind of question. So it's hard, and it can be really discouraging. And so that's where, thankfully, just myself and I know other people in my community, in our community, who are being open about it, who are starting that conversation, so they have support, because unfortunately a lot of places that support doesn't exist yet.
Changing tracks just a little bit, what is it like to be a young woman in today's world, especially in today's kind of like young single Christian culture, trying to, you and your friends, navigate the whole relationships thing and all this stuff when you know just how bad it is in terms of the content that people are viewing? Does it make it more difficult to even kind of consider guys knowing what is normal, knowing what just even your average Christian nice guy is statistically, what the probability is that he's viewing? Does that affect kind of your view of the world and your friends, like navigating just this whole thing? I think it's such a wildly different world in terms of, like you said, like people starting to understand that this is what girls are actually watching. But we already kind of know it's been accepted that this is what guys are watching. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's rough. I know a lot of people who are or have been addicted to pornography, because most people have. And that's just kind of something, going around life, whether it's work, church, friends, that the majority of people you're with are probably actively using porn. And thankfully, as my group of friends have become more aware, as people have battled their own porn addictions, they've gotten therapy, they've gotten support, they have true accountability. It's really cool because the numbers are changing. Like I know in my friend group, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so is addicted, but they're fighting it. And, that person's been clean for 4 months, and this person will hop in the car, let's go to sex addiction therapy. We're fighting it, and that's spreading in our community. It's rough being, just being around now. And when you talk to people and you start seeing in their interactions how people degrade women. And I think that's just one thing overarchingly. You see people devalue, especially girls and women, because of the pornography that they're watching. And something I realize I actually say in my friend group quite often is people tell me about an interaction that they had with someone and how poorly they were treated, and how just you can see how they were objectified in that interaction, how they were devalued in that interaction. And I just automatically am like, oh, I wonder what kind of porn they watch. And it's kind of sarcastic, but it's like, actually you just start understanding, and I start taking in interactions I have. I'm like, okay, well, you probably watch this kind of porn if you're treating me like that. Or this kind of porn's affected you, or at least affected the people in your life, that you can even say that to a girl. Some of the awful things people will say to each other, just I don't think would have happened even 15, 20 years ago. But now people are treating others in these objectifying, vile, horrific manner. And you can see it happens because of what, it's because of what they're watching online. And then it's impacting their relationships, and it's impacting their friendships, and even who they're working with, their colleagues. So it's just something that I guess I have it in my mind, just that, that's because they're watching porn, and you can just see it in their actions. So it's pretty it's awful how it's just part of all of society now. Again, though, just having a friend group where we talk about porn a lot, where we talk about sex addiction therapy a lot, where people are open, where people are honest with each other, true accountability, all of that. It's really neat to see how that changes the way people even treat each other, because we are taking a stance. We're fighting against the cultural norm, because the cultural norm is a pornified society.
What would you say to girls who think, well, that's all well and good, I want to be treated well, but you're saying that basically all guys watch porn, I guess I'm just going to have to settle for a pornified relationship if I want one, a relationship at all. If I want a relationship at all, pornography is going to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. See, you are worth so much more. Like, you don't deserve to be treated like that. No girl needs to accept a relationship where other women are being violently degraded, objectified, and abused. Because if you're dating a guy who is actively addicted to porn, he's actively watching porn, that's what's happening. Just imagine, if some guy said, oh, by the way, I guess I should tell you, but I have 3 other girlfriends and I abuse them. Hope you don't mind. That's what he's telling you when he says that he watches porn. And so if that's not okay, then that pornified relationship isn't okay. And though it should not be your job, I think for a lot of girls, when we ask the guys who are asking us out, hey, I have to ask, are you watching porn? When we ask those questions, when we challenge them like that, I know for some guys, that's been their wake-up call, where they've actually gone help. They go to sex addiction therapy because they realize, wait, like, I can't hurt girls and then expect a girl to believe I respect her. I don't want to hurt girls because I actually want to value them. And you can be that wake up call for him. And actually just last week, I talked to a girl who she just straight up told me, she came up to me and said, you changed my life. And how I had changed her life was simply encouraging a group of girls I was talking to ask the guys who ask them out if they're watching porn, and not to accept pornography in that relationship. Either he gets serious help and he stops watching porn, or you can't date him until he does. And so she said that, a few months into her relationship, she did ask the guy she was going out with if he was watching porn. That was part of his life, and they dealt with it, and he dealt with it. And now they have this strong, great relationship because he actually fought his porn addiction, because he realized that he couldn't truly value her and have a good relationship with her if he didn't. And so not only is she now in a relationship with a guy who's not addicted to porn, but that was what empowered him and inspired him and convicted him enough to get healing and freedom for himself. And again, girls, we're not responsible for guys' freedom and healing, but we do almost have that responsibility in our relationships, because we should not be participating in a relationship where girls are getting hurt. We don't want to be part of that. We can challenge, and who knows what good things might come from it. And if a guy says, no, I want you in porn, get out. You don't want other girls getting hurt inside your relationship, and that's what's happening if you accept that. And it's hard. Like I said, it's rough that we live in a society that is so saturated with pornography. But we need to take a stand against it. We need to find freedom for ourselves and for our friends and boyfriends. It includes them too.
There's a lot of guys, though, who might hear this and think like, okay, so I guess I'm going to go be a monk, because they have either they're struggling now, or they have struggled, and so they disqualify themselves from being in a relationship, or even doing things like ending up in ministry or activism or fighting for justice because of this. What would you say to them?
Mm-hmm. If you've been addicted to pornography and you are, or have been fighting that addiction, if you are taking care of yourself and disciplining yourself in a way that you're no longer part of that pornified culture, if you're fighting against that, you're who we want. We want fighters. We need people to fight for justice. We need people to fight for healthy, good relationships, to fight for actual self-sacrificing love. If you're the kind of guy who's had a porn addiction in his past and you are walking healed, if you're walking in freedom, you're exactly the kind of guy who we need in ministry, who we need in to fight in the fight against injustice. You're the exact kind of guy that girls are going to honestly want to date. We want people who are fighters. So I would say for anyone, you don't need to stay in shame. If you have that as part of your past, get healing, go to therapy, and start fighting, not just for yourself, but for your family and your community.
And then, okay, we just have to say this because we knew we would end up here, because it's our favorite topic, even more yours than mine, which is that you mentioned therapy a lot.
I do.
And
I love therapy.
And I think we just have to address it because, like, obviously, like, not every single person needs professional therapy to get to the point that they can say they're living a different life.
Yeah.
But I think both of us have seen, but essentially, like, this was my job, right? To talk to people who are doing this. And then the next thing I know, you're talking to me all the time about how great therapy is. Yeah, huge fans of therapy. So like, what have you seen is that difference where a professional therapist can take someone that often, just working through things with an accountability partner, accountability group, or doing some course? What is that difference? That's the reason this question got way too long. What is it about therapy, professional therapy, that makes you so excited when people actually go there?
So pornography addiction impacts people on every level. It impacts people emotionally. It impacts their relationships. It impacts them psychologically. It impacts them physically. And so for myself, I'm not a therapist, and I try to be a good friend. I try to be a listening ear, where people have asked for accountability or different ways that I can be a good friend to someone. That's what I seek to do. And for example, if my friend comes to me and tells me that they have cancer, there are a lot of things I could do to them. Maybe I can drive them to the hospital. Maybe they need some, I don't know, sort of supplements or medication pickup or whatever they need. There are ways I can help them, but I can't help them like a doctor. I can't help them like a physician can help them. And I would be a very bad friend if I said, hey, I know you have cancer. Let me help you as much as possible. You don't need anyone else. I'm only going to be a good friend if I say, let me be a good friend to you and let me get you to the professionals. And that's really what I've seen with sex addiction therapy. So people have come and asked me to be their accountability partner. They've asked me to talk through things with them, to listen to what they have to say. And I can do that. However, I'm not a therapist. And so there's been a few friends. I don't think I've ever had a friend so far, till pretty recently. Most friends resist the idea of therapy at first, most people I've talked to, because I don't know, I guess there's some stigma around it, which really needs to be broken, because therapy is just so incredible and so awesome. And it makes me smile with joy because therapy changes people's lives. And so I've had people where I've just kind of convinced them to go to one therapy session. I'll be the good friend. I'll listen. I'll keep you accountable. I'll do whatever. Let's try it one session. If you don't like it, drop it. And as of yet, I've had no one drop it, because therapists can be so helpful. They're trained, they're experienced, they're knowledgeable when it comes to fighting sex addiction therapy in a way that I'm not, and in a way that your mom's not, and in a way that your other friends, that your pastor, that your accountability partners, that no one else in your life is as trained as sex addiction therapists are to fight sex addiction. And so if you want to be healed, if you want to be free, I would highly, highly recommend sex addiction therapy. You don't take, you don't go to, I don't know, the eye doctor if you have cancer. That would be wrong. And there's times for all sorts of different kind of support and counseling and resources and friends and accountability. But if you have a sex addiction therapy is where you really need to be. They can support you in ways that you don't even understand yet. So I would just recommend everyone I know who's been to sex addiction therapy has benefited so much from it, has just sped up on their healing journey because of it, and discovered all these different reasons and things that are being impacted or have impacted their addiction, because that's what a therapist is trained to do. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that everyone with sex addiction goes to see a sex addiction therapist. They're going to be really helpful for you. So,
and I think what you said there is really important when you mentioned healing and freedom, because sometimes I know, coming from the perspective of the person who was addicted to pornography, is we get really focused on the freedom, and we forget that pornography, it wasn't just that we were complicit in hurting of other people that were affected by that pornography being made, and all those things, or the other people in our lives. And we think all of them need healing, and we're just focused on freedom. We forget that pornography was simultaneously hurting us, like you mentioned, right? That it actually hurt you in a big way if you're consuming pornography. And so a therapist, it's like you said, going to physio, right? Any doctor can tell you, help identify where the pain is, all these things. And then you end up going to the right type of therapist, and they go, move your knee like this. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I did not realize I could do that. Or I didn't realize this exercise can help me to heal so much faster. And I think that's been the biggest difference that I've seen in terms of the people who go all the way in that healing journey versus the ones who just stop once they stop compulsively consuming pornography.
Yeah. And that's a great point. One of my friends recently was telling me just about some different struggles they had in their life. And I knew they were a former porn addict, and they haven't watched porn for years. And I asked them, do you ever go to therapy for that? And they said no. And so we just talked about it a bit, and just these different things that are impacting them today. Not even specifically porn. It's other aspects of their life, but they're still hurt. They're still hurt because of their porn use. And so you know what? I know you haven't watched porn. You've been sober for a really long time. You probably should still go to therapy. And so they're on their way there. And I think that's a really good point, because again, pornography, it doesn't just hurt others, it hurts you. And if you want to be healed, not only will a sex addiction therapist be able to help you with that, they can also speed up that healing process.
Yeah, and I will link below in this video to a fantastic article from Jessica Harris on how who's become one of the most well-known speakers on fighting pornography and telling her story, her journey of what it was like to actually see a therapist and allow yourself to think about the healing that you need, the fact that porn hurt you, and you don't have to carry around that pain forever. So I'll link to the article below, because I think that'll be super helpful for anybody watching. Thank you so much for doing this, Devorah, and I'm super obviously proud to be able to fight alongside you. And I mean, there's a bunch of us siblings all in this fight, and it's been a treat to fight together. I'm sure we're making our parents very proud. So thanks for doing this and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.